Views and comments expressed on this program are not necessarily those of New Birth Broadcasting Corporation, its staff, management, or advertisers. Gospel AM 1490 WMBM.
The all-new Children'sTrust.org is up and running, and it's loaded with information for every parent, from year-round programs for kids of every age to health and safety and even quality childcare. You can find it all at the Children'sTrust.org right from your mobile device.
It's all the information you need.
For me, even support for me.
It's so easy, even my dad can use it.
With new user-friendly features, the Children'sTrust.org provides easy access to programs that will benefit your family. And it's available on your computer, your tablet, or your phone. Visit the new Children's Trust website and see for yourself. It's that easy. From healthy kids to healthy relationships with your kids, programs from A to Z and everything in between can all be found at one easy-to-use site.
The Children'sTrust.org. One click away.
The Children's Trust, because all children are our children.
Good morning and welcome. Thank you for tuning in. This program is sponsored and paid for by the Children's Trust of Miami-Dade County.
Good morning, I'm Edwin Eldell. In the Spotlight today is a special program to commemorate Black History Month brought to you by the Children's Trust. In 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court banned desegregation in public schools in the landmark Brown versus the Board of Education. It took 5 years for Miami-Dade to begin integrating classrooms because education is the key to unlocking every child's potential. The Children's Trust wants you to take this time to reflect on those early days of school desegregation and what they were like. Joining me is Dr. Enid Pinkney, educator and historian, Derek T. Davis, curator of Old Dillard's Museum, and Dr. Marvin Dunn, educator and author. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Important subject. What do you guys think this subject really means to us today? Begin with you, Dr. Dunn.
Well, I think it means we need to take a look back from 1954 to the present to make an assessment as to whether desegregation of schools and all the things that were supposed to flow from that would have been so great, if those things really have happened, and if they've not happened, why have they not happened? And Dade County provides a good place to review that issue and those questions.
Okay. Dr. Dunn is a author and educator. He's the author of Black Miami in the 20th Century and co-author of The Land of Our Land, Immigrants and Power in Miami and the Miami Riot of 1980. He taught in the Department of Psychology at Florida International University for 34 years. Dr. Enid Pinkney may be small in stature, but she is mighty in spirit. Noted as one of Miami's living treasures, she has spent her life fighting for justice, equality, and the preservation of Black history. Dr. Pinkney, what do you think this all means to us today, education in the African American community?
Well, I think, as Dr. Dunn said, we need to look at where we are today and from whence we have come. And then we need to look at what we need to do to improve the situation. Because as I look at it, and I'm at the Hampton House every day, and I see people who are walking the streets, 27th Avenue, lost. They're lost. And I don't see anybody trying to help them find their way. I think we have a great challenge to reach out to the lost generation that's walking our streets to try to help to educate them and to help them to get some values so that they will respect themselves and set goals for themselves. We have a big job to do, and we're sleeping through it.
That's those strong words. So I was talking to Derek T. Davis. Our paths crossed many years ago. We were talking about some of the things that happened in the era of desegregation here in Miami. He's a South Florida native. cultural publicist and advocate. He's who has successfully managed historic properties, including visual arts exhibits and performing arts project for more than 2 days. Worked for the Black Archives History and Research Foundation of South Florida. David, Derek, what do you look at today and sees how important education and
well, with Dr. Dunn and Ms. Pinckney, it seems like we missed a beat. Somehow during integration, we never caught up with what the movement should change to and how should it morph us to the next level. And we got to catch up on that beat. And part of doing that is looking back over it and seeing what happened and how we can get back in sync with each other to keep a forward movement.
Very good. Well, we've all talked about looking back,
yes,
and that's where we need to go. Let's go back. What was it? What was the atmosphere in 1954 and the years following as we started talking about integration here in South Florida?
Well, there was a lot of white resistance to the Brown decision in 1954. Dade County did not flow smoothly into the process of desegregating schools. The first one that was the first public school in Dade County that was desegregated was Orchard Villa Elementary School in Liberty City. I think the year was maybe
59, I think it was. I think they started going as early as 59.
Yeah. And now that was a white school when it was desegregated, and an all-white school at the time. And my understanding is that by Christmas break, the school, all the white kids were gone. Maybe two families left by Christmas break. They just flowed out of Orchard Villa into private schools, Catholic schools, homeschooling, or what have you. And that was the pattern that we saw all over the state, all over the country. As desegregation settled in, white people fled, and schools became resegregated based upon residential boundaries, and the schools that people attended were the ones that were required in that particular boundary. It did not work. We never got to integration. We barely got to desegregation.
And in that atmosphere, what was the wave like? As I remember, Dr. Pinckney, didn't they have to call out the Highway Patrol, National Guard? It was that the whole thing was.
Well, it's interesting that you what Dr. Dunn said, because I remember it was Dr. John O. Brown's son, John O. Brown Jr., that the case was fought for, and he went to Orchard Villa.
Wow.
He was, I believe he was the first black student to go to Orchard Villa. And he's now a medical doctor also.
Right.
So what happened, because somehow or another I got transferred to Edison Senior High School.
Was it white at that time, Dr. Pinckney?
It was, it was integrating. This was what had happened.
What year was that?
As the children said, what had happened.
What had happened was...
What has happened?
I think this was around 67.
Okay.
Juanita Hamberry had been transferred from North Dade. She was an assistant principal at North Dade, and she was sent to Edison as a counselor. But she resisted that because she said that was a demotion. And so she said she was not a counselor, she was an assistant principal. So, I believe that she filed a suit against the school board, and I think she won that. So they needed a counselor, so then I became the counselor. And this was during the time, and I'm glad you have Derek here.
Oh, yeah, he was there.
Because he was a student during that time. And he could tell you from experience. The students were coming to me complaining that when they were in the class and they'd raise their hands, that they would be ignored. When they knew the answers, that the teacher would ignore them and wait until they didn't know the answer and call on them. And it was frustrating. So they wanted to do something about it. And I said, well, what can we do? But we did not want the school to know what we would plan to do. So we met at Dr. and Mrs. Brown, John O'Brown's house, with some of the students and the parents to listen to the complaints of the students. And so my suggestion was, why don't we write all of this, put it down, put it in writing, and have from the students' point of view, and come up with some kind of vehicle where we can express it. And so this took place. Students wrote their feelings, and Derek was one of those students that did that. And so we didn't know what we were going to do with it, so we said that we will try to present it somewhere. But one of the students, and I can't remember his name, Derek, his last name was Robinson, he was studying his skit in somebody's class, in a white teacher's class. She saw it, and she got outraged, and she took it to the principal. And he said he was studying for a play, so then he asked me, he called me, and he asked me did I know anything about that this was going on in the school. And I had to tell him yes, I knew, because I was meeting with these students in the community. And so some of the grammar wasn't quite up to par, and the language, but I had not checked all of that. I was just letting them express themselves. So he was concerned about that, and he wanted an English teacher to assist. He said, well, let's see what we can do with this to make it more grammatical. I said, fine. So he assigned an English teacher to work with me to put this skit together. And so after we sort of got it together, then he wanted it to be done in the chorus room so some teachers could look at it and see, if it could be presented to the school. I said, no, that's censorship, and I'm not going to go along with that. I go along with grammar and, cleaning it up or whatever way, but when we present this, I want it in the auditorium. And so the skit was presented in Edison High School auditorium, and the students gave it a standing ovation. Ellis Berger, who was the editor of the Miami News, wrote about it in the paper, and then Channel 10 asked about it and wanted it presented, and it was presented on Channel 10. Now, you need Derek to tell you about
what was the atmosphere with the students? Right.
With the students.
Yes, and one of the things was I helped to put a lot of that script together, and I typed it. And I was not a good typist because I never actually formally took typing. So it was not just grammar, it was all kind of words striked out, because I didn't use write out. I would just go back and strike out and keep writing. So a lot of, because really in writing things, you have to do a lot of research. So some of the background that I had in there was actually doing research for some of there were a few books out at the time. One of them, I think it was Black History Lost, Stolen, and Strayed, and some other books that we actually went and did some research to capture the moment and to show the students' experience. Because how I helped out, because I was in theater, and so how I organized it is there was a scene that was a student in a classroom, and she gets in one of these situations where everybody's playing around the classroom, the teacher walks in, a black student who is kind of not really involved in the shenanigans that go on gets called out and chastised for causing a disruption in the class. And then it's sort of like she kind of like steps out of the class into to the audience and starts talking. And a narrator comes and starts telling her about Black history and how the history of Black people. So the rest of it kind of like does other scenes that are taken out from some of the books, like to show Black history going back to Africa, going through all those things as you're going through the play. So.
So this was a pretty tumultuous time
yes.
In education. I'm often, given to look at, the documentaries on the Little Rock Nine and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Was it like that here in Miami? I mean, was it?
No, it wasn't that bad.
It wasn't that bad.
It wasn't like Little Rock, which attracted international attention. But the white resistance was palpable. And the long period of time that it took to really get the school desegregation process moving in Dade County reflected this. But by the time the integration desegregation matter hit Dade County, the white population there had changed some compared to other parts of Florida. There were more Northerners here by the 1950s and into the early 60s, more retirees, many Jews coming down from the Northeast. So you didn't have so much of the active resistance in terms of whites showing up at the schools and demonstrating against integration and that sort of thing. The damage in our county was the sort of thing that the other two guests have talked about, Dr. Pinckney.
Yeah, a lot of it was subtle. Because I remember one thing, because I did something one time for the newspaper afterwards about that situation, how you felt to be at the school. And there were things like, when you would go on the street, 2nd Avenue, when you're coming out of school, and you would be a black student there standing, on the corner, you'd always come by and you'd always see these cars come up, and you'd hear the locks go on. I mean, because and I didn't even know cars had that at that time. Because this is way back. Mm-hmm. But the cars with the electronic locks, you would go there and you see somebody park, and you hear them locking their cars while they're sitting on the road. When we had the protest, one of the things we talked about, and it was kind of funny because one of the who I think was one of the best teachers there, and I think later became a principal there, but she could not pronounce the word Negro properly.
Oops. Yeah.
I can just imagine how many situations that would have been a problem.
Yes. And the school spirit song was a takeoff on Dixie. And so here you are, you're supposed to be standing up and you're singing this song about Dixie. The mascot for Edison, which is still the mascot for Edison, is called they're called the Red Raiders. But when you really do the history of that, the Red Raiders were actually a bunch of whites who used to terrorize blacks and runaway slaves. So that was a part of it. And when you came into the right near the office, the administrative office of the school, they had all of these pictures and statues of Confederate officers, because at one time I think the school was the Confederate training ground. So there were all these like subtle things, and like she said, when you're in the classrooms, the attention you got. See, I had a little different experience because the integration did start earlier. So you had a group of black students who had been integrated in elementary school, and those are the ones who they were going to integrate into the white schools. Well, I didn't do that. I went to Dorsey for the full up to the 9th grade, and so I had not gone to a integrated elementary school, and then came to Edison. So a lot of the grades I was supposed to, if I would have gone to Northwestern, I would have been in all honors classes. Because I went to Edison, I get in all remedial classes for the English, for the history, and all of it. I got into the remedial classes because they figured since I had come from a black school,
you needed
I needed remediation.
You needed remediation.
But unless I'm mistaken about this, Edison started out as the Dade County Agricultural School.
Yes.
Wow.
It was where white parents who wanted their kids to become farmers sent their kids to go to high school. Mm-hmm. That was Edison's beginning. As a matter of fact, I understand the story, so the story goes, that the principal of Edison in those days, one of the principals of the Dade County Agricultural School in those days, was a man by the name of MacArthur. I don't know his first name, but at that time, Edison had cows and chickens and hogs, and they planted things out, and they had fresh milk that they would serve the kids from the cows.
Dairy.
Yeah, and the principal saw the school making so much money by selling milk that he resigned and set up MacArthur Dairy.
It's the next question that the Children's Trust wants me to ask. We're going to go back. I went to Edison. I don't know if you know that, Dr. Pinkney. With Gayla at junior high
Gayla.
school.
May I interrupt right
yes,
there?
you may. Yes, you may.
Yes.
You didn't mention her before, and I know you want to.
I want to say something about that. Gayla was the first black student to try out for the majorettes, and she didn't make it. Somehow or another, she didn't qualify. And that was when they had a demonstration at Edison with Nat Moore, and I can't call all the names of all the students, but that was another thing that I had to deal with after she didn't make it. Then, but we continued to work, and Diane Dyes Pascal now, and she became a principal. Diane became, because Gayla became a social worker. It's interesting too that these students who were there at that time, I stay in touch with some of them. Harry Coxum, for instance, is now chairman of the board of trustees at Talladega College, a millionaire. His brother Henry, also a millionaire, is in New Orleans. He sends for me every time he gets some kind of award. My husband and I get a free trip to wherever.
Great.
So those were times that I look back on to see what those students went through and what they have become.
But Dr. Pinkney, let me just mention one other thing that goes back to your own personal experience. But when desegregation was ordered, many black principals and assistant principals were simply demoted. You touched on this, but the way in which this normally proceeded was that the black principals would be demoted to assistant principals or even counselors and then sent into the white schools. So there was a tremendous insult to their training and professionalism that they had to take a second seat simply because of the desegregation process.
But we have to, I would like to personally applaud, I know you took, that had to be a big strike, but thank God you were there, because if you hadn't been there, what would have happened? I mean, it was so important. But one of the next questions I wanted to go back to, sometime in early 1980s, I was out on a story when I was working for a television station, and I was with a police officer, a sergeant, and we were riding all night, and he said, I know you, and I said, I know you. We knew each other. And it took about 5 hours before we got back around to Edison Junior High. And this was a white police officer. And he said, man, I can't believe I've forgotten who you were, because we were such good friends in this time of turmoil. We were such good friends. So what was it like as a student? I mean, did you have white friends? Did the students sort of take to you, or was it the principal? I mean, the teachers versus the students. How did it all work?
And it was a mix, because there were some of the whites who were not. Because even I say, when I was talking about the person that couldn't say properly pronounce the word Negro, she was actually a very good teacher, and she was, like I said, she became a principal. She did things. She tried to work on it, but the lady just couldn't. It always came out Negro when she was trying to say Negro. Because that was the way they spoke. That was her accent. Yeah. So and it was, like I said, it was a very, very strange misbeat, because we were walking to the situation that we didn't know. For me, it was like the first time that I'd actually been in close contact with white people in my life. I mean, you might see them in the store, but being in close contact, that you're developing friendships, that there were some gangs out there at the school that did not want you there. There were places that that blacks we had like one of the shops that you went to get your sodas. There was like one shop that we could go to. Everybody went there who was black. You didn't kind of go to the other shops in the area. So it was a mix and range of who you could be with, who you couldn't be with. It was a test of a lot of the rules of the schools, because they had some traditions that weren't part of black traditions. It was like when you're talking about the cheerleaders. One of the reasons we wanted a black cheerleader, because we thought their cheers were lame. and we would be doing cheer. No, we would be doing Northwestern cheers to Edison things because we wanted to, we wanted our culture to be a part of what we were doing there. So it was a mixture. There were people that that you were not going to get along with, and there were people that you knew that were that could be your friends.
Okay, I think we have a caller on the line. Do we want to go to that caller?
Hi. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'll be brief.
What's your name? Tell us.
Dee.
Okay, Dee.
Okay, both my parents were educators, so I know well. I remember them stenciling lesson plans and all of this kind of thing at home. My mom worked for Charlotte Ford.
Oh, my goodness.
Clark.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
I remember her saying, they had to be girdled and dressed in proper attire and X, Y, and Z. They had faculty meetings. They approved those lesson plans the week ahead or 2 weeks ahead. It was systematic. It was thorough. They were professional. They took those kids, the ones that didn't have or came to school not as they should be, they took them under their wings. They even bought them clothes. They helped them with grooming, the whole nine. But when they integrated the school, I remember because I was growing up, when they integrated the school, they took all the brightest, all the best teachers, and they put them in the white schools. And they gave us the absolute opposite.
Okay. So thank you for bringing that up. Dr. Pinckney, I think one of the things, and we all may remember this, there was a movement to make sure that black educators like yourself went to the schools along with the children who were being integrated into the schools. You recall that?
Yes. That's how I got to Edison.
Yeah. They wanted to make sure that there were role models and people that they could look up to in the schools, which I think was very important as well. Because if you leave, we'd grown up, all of us, in African American, in schools in the African American community where there was the principal, there was the council, everybody that we looked up to. But then you'd go to the schools and it wouldn't necessarily have someone who looked like you that you could look up to, which was very important.
One of the things we did not touch on was the disparate pay for white and black teachers. The Dade County school system up until the 1950s anyway, maybe even early 60s, paid black teachers less than they paid white teachers for the same absolute role in the school system. Mm-hmm. And there was a hearing before the school board over this. There was a lawsuit. I'm not quite sure who the plaintiffs were, but
I think Mr. Reynolds.
That's right.
Sylvia Reynolds' uncle.
You can tell the story better than I can. Go ahead. All I know, the superintendent was Joe Hall at the time.
I remember Joe Hall.
And Joe Hall argued, again, Enid, you were there, so maybe you can tell the story better than I can, but Joe Hall argued before the school board that black teachers should not be paid the same as white teachers because white teachers were better prepared. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that no one had raised the question before, and these were outside agitators who were trying to force the school system to do this. But Enid, can you add to that? You knew Reynolds, at least the case is known to you.
Yes, I remember that, and what I do remember, it seems to me though, and I can't remember it clearly,
well, Reynolds lost. He lost the case. The school board won and was still able to proceed to pay white teachers more, and it got overturned at a higher court.
Right.
And but I'm glad you're bringing all of this up because our history is important. You see, the people who are here now, getting the salaries that they're getting it on the back of Mr. Reynolds. And they don't know that because we are not telling our history.
We're not telling our story.
We're not telling our story. Right. And, we're having a history office over at Hampton House on the TIFF where we have to tell our story because this generation that's coming up now does not have the respect from whence we have come. And until we do a better job educating the youth. We really need to look at the curriculum that young people are being taught today to see how we can bring some innovations that will attack this problem. All of us need to assume that as a responsibility, because this history that you're bringing up now, we don't know it, we don't have an appreciation for it, and I think it's contributing to our lack of self-respect and not having the proper value system.
Yeah, and the caller reminded me of something else, and with also what Dr. Dunn is saying, is that the first wave of integration, the one that actually happened before me, they were actually looking for the best. They were looking for what they thought were the best black students and the best black teachers to actually to try them out at the elementary school level. So it was like a movement to actually try to prove if black teachers and students could survive in a white school. So there were these test subjects that were doing. Because I remember at Edison, I think one of the first black students there was actually Newell Daltrey. That later became, and he was a part of that test group, that group of black students that they felt were at a level that they might survive in a white in an integrated school. Right. So you had the same thing. So what she's talking about when they got the best, yes, in that first wave, they went and they looked and they actually took out a lot of the best teachers out of the black schools, and a lot of the best black students also were in that wave that went to those first days of testing.
Now, not to mention the impact of that on the black schools.
Yes.
You take the best teachers, the best counselors, the best students out, and then you're left with a student body that's not able to compete as well as they should have been able to.
Right, and replacing them sometimes with sometimes younger
first year
teachers who were white, who just couldn't, because the teachers they had at black schools, they were on your case.
Oh my God, yes they were. I'm gonna have to stop. We could go on for like half a day on this.
Yes.
I guess the most important thing is the takeaway is that we're almost out of time. Is that it was a struggle. Students like yourself, educators like yourself, historians like yourself, did a lot to get us into these schools, to get the good education. We need to take advantage of it. It's out there, it's for us, and we look back to today, it's for us, it's there for us, so let's take advantage of it. I'd like to thank all of you, Dr. Dunn, Dr. Pinckney, and Derek, for joining us with the Children's Trust Half Hour. Very important topic, education, how we got here, for integration in this Black History Month. Thank you all for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Thank you so much for tuning in. This program was paid for and sponsored by the Children's Trust of Miami-Dade County. For more information, dial 211. Tune in each first Thursday of the month at 9:05 a.m. right here on AM 1490 WMBM. Call 211 day or night, for all children are our children.